Okay, everyone. So hi. Yeah, it's pretty late here. Well, it's Thursday night, so yeah, we're here at the second day, and we're going to talk about testing. It seems like the only one that is talking about testing around here is me. I'm half excited and half kind of like, oh well, we're talking about all the cool stuff. Now I'm going to talk about the thing that no one likes. No, anyway, so yeah. So let's start with testing. But first, talk about me. Well, you already know about me, kind of. I don't have spare time just to answer the questions, and yeah, so literally I don't have spare time. I don't know how I do it, but well, I going to publish a book about Vue, called Learning Vue, and it's have the color cover, which is so nice. So you can check it out. It will be published on December. And I'm a Cloudinner ambassador, a Vue.js Israel organizer, and a Google developer expert. Yeah, I'm working in Microsoft in AI experience group, which is doing experience on AI, machine learning, ChatGPT, and stuff like that. So you're welcome to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Conan X, my website at myashamin.com. Okay, that's enough about me. As I say, testing. Well, yes, everyone knows that we need to do testing, right? We finished testing, we finished developing the Nuxt application. Now, here comes the sad part, testing. And yes, I hate test. I don't think any one of you really like test, do you? If so, that's good for you because I don't like tests. I like tests until I have to write the test for my code. And that is when I really don't like it. And mostly because of all this dilemma of testing where we have only code-based complexity, we finish the work, we need to choose a testing framework, we need to set up the testing pipeline, we need to learn about new stuff, we need to decide how much is the coverage because one person can say we want to have 100% coverage, one say, hey, who cares, just take 50% coverage or 70% coverage is good. Where the stopping line? And all of this going down to one thing. Where is the time? Oh, talking about spare time again. Where is the time for us to do all of this to make sure that we have the testing system set up, running in the pipeline, automated? Oh, well, that's it. But how are we going to overcome all this dilemma when we have to do the testing? You know what? The only solution for that, got to plan it. Yeah, you have to spend time to plan it. I know time is also a relatively problem. Well, but if you do planning the test, you will find that it's much easier for later on to maintain the test. Such that we plan the test, we know what type of project, whether it's client-side rendering, whether it's server-side rendering, and from this type of project, we know what we are going to prioritize for writing tests, whether we want to set up the test for unit testing more, for integration testing more, for end-to-end testing more, or what kind of speed we are caring about, what kind of parallel testing we need, and type of test, and so on. And of course, we're going to make sure that we need to follow the order of the test so that whenever something wrong, we know exactly where to look at. And of course, obviously, automate. We always have to plan in order to automate our test. Because face it, no one going to have time to sit there and run the workflow of the pipeline or run the test manually by typing on terminal. Because it may work on his machine, it doesn't work in general. So yep, all of these are the aspect of planning. And once we got all of this figured out, we will come down to the thing and where we're going to choose the tool. And this is the interesting part. Where we're going, there's a lot of tool out there, and this is also the main things in my talk, like how we're going to choose the tool and what we're going to choose the tool. Okay, before we're going to choose this tool, let's take a look at our legendary pyramid for testing. So we have 3 layers. Everyone know about it. It's 101 testing. We have a unit testing at the bottom for the independent logic, testable logic, isolated logic. Integration test, we're supposed to be combine on this testable logic together and making sure that it works together. And end-to-end test. Do we need all of them? It depends. let's check it out. Anyway, so let's take a look about a demo project. So this is the pizza store where you can search for pizza. You can add the pizza to your cart. Well, it's missing the add to cart here, but you understand that. I mean, I took the screenshot when they don't have the add to cart button, but you understand that. So this pizza have some features. A list of pizza, search to filter the list, external data API that you're going to fetch the data, such as the pizza from external database, and then it has to have an address where you enter the address on the URL on the browser. It will go to this specific page. Okay, so let's talk about unit testing first, shall we? So for unit testing for Nuxt, especially, we have a very nice package from the Nuxt team. It's called Nuxt Test Utils that allow us to already test using with vtest. So what we need to do is we need to install vtest and Nuxt Test Util, and it will allow us to write unit test and with the minimum configuration. However, there's something I need to point out. First of all, there's not all the code files need unit testing. There's a lot of argument around that if you write a test, if you write a code file, you need to have a test file accompanied to that code file and test that file, whatever code inside that file. That can be overkill. And why? We're going to check out. And the second thing is we always have to remember using unit testing, we always use mocks for dependency, because the whole idea is we need to make sure that we test the isolated without external interference to the functional logic inside this piece of code. Okay, and let's go back to our pizza store. This is the internal implementations for that pizza store for the templates. So what we have here, we have several logic we need to test. We need to fetch the pizza asynchronously. We need to allow search by name. We need to display the filter list of pizza by the search term. And for that, we're going to do two things if we want to do unit test. We're going to test the component logic separately. So for example, we're going to test the filter array for filtering the list of pizza. We're going to test the UPizza composable for the asynchronous fetching data. And then finally, after we test all the component logic, internal logics, we will do a sanity test with appropriate mock logics in order to see if the component is still working. Okay, so in order to start with Nuxt, with Vite and Nuxt test utils, first we install the package, and then we need to config the vtest.config.js. Remember here I highlight the vtest, which means it's not vite.config.js. vtest.config.js is specifically for vtest, because otherwise if you put vite, it will throw you error one or another. Either the test will work, but the Nuxt project in local development will not work, or the opposite. I don't know how it happened. Maybe it's only in my local machine, but it happened. Why? I figured out that because if we put the plugin as Vue, then it's kind of override whatever Nuxt configuration for the Vite management tool. So this should be separate. Okay. The next thing we need to do in the config is to define the DOM element. The DOM environment. So we use in here, I'm using JS DOM, but you feel free to use anything else such as Happy DOM and so on. And we also set the API vtest available globally, so we don't have to implicitly import it. Like if we don't need to do import, expect display it in any of the text files, saving us from rewriting the code. And coverage, we talk about coverage. How much is the coverage should work, right? So I would recommend to keep at 80% at most, and no less than that. Basically, more than 80% to 85%, it will be overkill. Less than 80%, it will be too little. And this is the time when you leave 20% for things that you don't want to test, or things that is not need to test because you know for sure 100% is working. Well, that's good luck because you are so sure about it. Okay, so let's go to the functional testing, a very simple one in our demo. So for filter array. So in filter array, I have a function that what it does is that is filter the item according to the key and event. So it's very straightforward. For VTest, if you use VTest, it's a similar thing like you use test or any other testing library. It just need to import the file, write the test using the proper syntax. Nothing out of the ordinary here. Everything's as usual. For asking data testing for the composable use pizza, that's another thing. So for this functionality, for this function, initially what I did is I have a use fetch, which is a custom use fetch. I know what you're talking about. Hold your thought. We're talking about use fetch, which is a custom composable, because when I write initially I can write in Vue, because in Vue we don't have all this out of the box API mechanism, so we need to write our own composable, which is fine. You can also test the use fetch yourself to make sure that it works. However, with Nuxt, you don't really need this kind of function because it already have use async, use fetch, or even $fetch. These three API allow us to actually fetching data or make a wrapper to fetch a specific data for us without we need to take care of testing it. We need to take care of the writing, the loading on error handling and stuff like that. So for that, because we're using the external dependency and we trust the Nuxt team, it's doing a great job in making sure that it's covered. We only need to test if there's an extra modification. Otherwise, we don't need to test this function because we're just a wrapper. There's nothing here to test additionally. So if you have an extra modification, then you should do the unit test. And of course, when you write the unit test for this function, you need to make sure that you have use async data mock, just like how we mock the fetch and the DOM fetch for testing the custom use fetch before. But another question here: if there's an extra modification, do we really need to put inside the UPISA, such as if this was a filter array or it was, I don't know, like rearrange the data or map into another data layer? We probably don't need to put everything inside the same composable, right? We can split the data modification into a separate function, for example, filter array, and then we test it separately without the need to mock the use async data. And from that on, we don't need to test this composable at all. So this composable stay there, but only we need to test it. We need to test a piece of code from the extra modification. And if there's no extra modification, we don't need to test it at all. Simple as that. And that's the async data testing. And again, if you really want to test the async data testing end-to-end, not end-to-end here, but like a full data testing in component, you probably need extra library for that. So let's take a look about integration test, which come back to our demo. Integration test we're talking about here is the sanity test of component rendering with or without mock logic. You can also choose without mock logic and put everything together and do the sanity, the whole test, integration test. It really depends. So how do we do component testing in Nuxt? It doesn't work out of the box. If we want to do things like interactions or other things than just simply check if the component render correctly, we need Vue text utils. Unfortunately, maybe the next version of Nuxt text util will already grab over Vue text util, but this is exactly where I'm saying that if you want to test extra thing like async data flow, you need in a component, you need to have Vue text util. Otherwise, you have no way to wait for the data to finish. Okay, so how do we do component testing for Nuxt? After we install Vue text util, we import the shadow mount, just the same thing like any Vue applications, and then we shadow mount the component into a wrapper, and that's it. You can from here you can use the API of Vue text util to do the assertion, to find the element, to do on and other like interaction and so on. Now here come another question. Do we really want to do component testing using this at this level? Because otherwise, we still need to do component testing. We still need to do component testing in the end-to-end level, because that's the real interactions. Okay, so next step back a moment. When we talk about end-to-end testing here, in server-side rendering, in the flow of server-side rendering in Nuxt, there's two things that you need to pay attention to. Number one is we need to check if the page is rendered with the correct HTML file. And the second one is the actual interaction experience testing. This is end-to-end testing. So for the first one, page request test, what we can use the mechanism of Nuxt test util. It's come up already with the browser using Playwright, and it has the setup function where you can actually define to run the server in the back when you run the test, and use the browser to actually test it. And then you can use the function fetch, $fetch from the test util to render, to get back the HTML render page. And then from there, we can assert whether this page contains all the data we want. However, it doesn't have interaction test. If we want to do end-to-end interaction test, I believe that soon Nuxt test util will also support that, but at the moment it's still work in progress, so I have no idea what's going on there. So for end-to-end test, interaction test, since we're talking about Playwright, we should use Playwright. Why? Because it's a cross-platform platform library, and it's a single API you can use in any languages supported. Full isolation with reusable authentication setup, has supported tool ecosystem, and parallel testing supported, and of course it's very fast and it's free, and it's for Microsoft. No, just I think it's so fun. But installing it, you can install it with the Playwright package and Playwright/test. It will help to print everything up. Usually when you run Playwright, it will do automatically set up everything for your project. However, if it doesn't, here is some information in the configuration that you should pay attention to. First, the location of the test folder. Here I put E2E at the location for my end-to-end test. If you already put the E2E test and the Nuxt project, everything in the same level, then you need to exclude this test directory from the vtest config, so that when you run the unit test using vtest, it will not try to go into this folder and trying to run all the tests in this folder, because it wouldn't work. Reporter using HTML, the default, and we can set up the browser to test, such as what kind of browser here, Chrome, Safari, or mobile device, and so on. And lastly, you can also run your own web server, so you can do the end-to-end test for your own local development instead of just go to a pre-product or production environment. Okay, so how do we go to write test? Here, the link is very simple example of the piece of Vue test we saw in the screenshot. So in here, what I'm doing, I'm going to the locations, put a URL for the pizza. I'm going to use the page.locator to locate the element. Here, I'm using the data test ID as my selector. I like to use this data test ID as selector, so if one change, it will stay there, mostly stay there consistency. Because if you're using, let's say, HTML tag, or using ID or class, that can be a bit problematic if someone decided that it's not good enough, they want to change it, and then you have to go to the test and change it also in the test. And for using data test attribute, you will not have to go, you will minimize the change that you need to do such a thing. And then I do interaction. When I got the element, here is the search input. I'm going to get the input, and I'm going to fill the input with what I want to search for. And lastly, I'm going to search the result by using the API to check whether the element which starting with the word Hawaiian is visible. And that's it. I got the playwright test up and running. And once it's run, it will open an HTML page that contains the detail of the test, whether you fail or whether you succeed in your test. And as you can see, everything is failed. Yeah, don't ask me why. I don't know. I have no idea why, but yeah, it's failed. And every time I look at this, I feel like I really hate testing. But you know, when you see that, you know that you need to fix either your test or either your code or either your configuration. And one step before we finish the playwright, for the nice thing about playwright is that you don't have to install a terminal. You can install a VS Code as an extension, and it will come with everything. You can also install with what kind of browser you want to use for VS Code. It got built in, and it works just flawlessly. You can also have the playwright test runner. You can also have tracer, and you can also have code generator. In this scope of the talk, I will not deep dive in playwright. I leave it for Debbie, but well, you know, check it out, playwright. And lastly, other tools I would like to give a shout out. Nuxt VTest module. This module is still in development, so a lot of things broken, a lot of things not working. I still haven't figured out how to configure it correctly, but I trust Daniel and Anthony to fix it and make it work very shortly. So once it works, I recommend you to use Nuxt VTest and test of VTest Plus Nuxt Test 2. So check it out. And the other thing is HappyDome. If you really want to use something, I heard that HappyDome is better than JS Dome, but I don't know. I never tried it. Anyway, so check it out, and we'll probably check it out also. And lastly, what next? We saw quite some tool here. We see a bit of testing. We see a bit of end-to-end testing. You can see it that we don't always need everything. We don't really need unit tests for composable that's just a wrapper or obvious logic that already test in another file, another code, isolated code, right? And we also don't need the component testing properly in the integration level. If we already have end-to-end tests with Playwright, it's also have component testing there. So what you need to do is you probably need to plan your test code when you need it to code, when you need to plan it, and then code later. Split the component logic, and then once you split the component logic as much as you can or as much as is needed, don't overkill it. Then you will see whether you really need some certain test or whether you really need to have writing a test that jam all everything together and all the dependency together and mock together. Mock responsibly, yep, we talk about it. Using meaningful locator. And lastly, if you're already there using end-to-end testing, you Xcode for accessibility testing, it's important to make sure that your application is at least covered by accessibility. And yes, Lighthouse doesn't count. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for joining my talk, and I hope you find it helpful.
Yay, thank you, Maya. All right, so a few questions from us for Q&A.
Okay, I'm ready.
Testing appears to be the topic that many developers avoid. What is one piece of advice that you'd provide to developers to regularly incorporate testing into their processes?
Oh, wow. That's like one piece of advice to regular corporate testing. Okay, well, you know what? Just do it.
All
Just
right,
think
I dig it.
if basically what I usually do if it's the simple features, then I probably don't write tests. If it's a very simple feature, I probably don't write tests. But if I start to write a bit like more complex feature, I usually do design first, and then I just split the design, and then from the design I know which part of the test, which part of the code I should write test for it. I don't ask you to follow TDD, TDD. Yeah, TDD. I'm not good with acronym. I don't ask you to follow that kind of methodologies like that because it can work, it cannot work depending on which level you are. Just more important thing is try to plan and design your code, and then you will see where you really need to build a test. And put in mind that either way you're going to write a test for it. So don't leave for the last minute.
Thank you. Yes. All right. How does testing in a Nuxt application differ from testing in a standard Vue.js application?
Um, one thing started is that let's say in testing a Nuxt application, you have to add also the test to fetch the HTML to make sure that it's rendered the HTML correctly. And the second thing is for Vue application, I think it's I usually I test mostly with Vue test util, and it would be enough for me to cover most of the case. And also you can write snapshot test. But for Nuxt application, I would say I usually go for the other approach, which means more end-to-end test and more end-to-end test and more unit test and end-to-end test, less integrated test. And also you can see that for Vue application, you test, you only need Vue test util and Vite. For Nuxt application, you need Vue test util, Nuxt test util, and Vite together. And probably playwright if you want that.
Thank you. All right. Last question. What's your favorite recently released feature in Nuxt, and how do you think it sets apart from other frameworks?
Oh, wow. Can I say one thing? I oh my god, I have a a confession. I haven't looked at the recent release feature, so I have no idea. But yeah,
That's okay. We'll come up with a different question then. What is just your favorite Nuxt feature?
yeah. Oh, I think I like everything. Though. I like the most is the how the asking data on this the querying data is working much better, and the Nuxt text util it's just like you got almost everything you needed to test the applications, and so that's the thing I like. And also the Nuxt, the setting up the Nuxt the application is so fast. I think that's my favorite feature, like the performance, the very fast.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Maya, for joining today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.